A high-profile wrongful death lawsuit filed in Ontario's Superior Court of Justice by plaintiff Dan Hartman has taken Pfizer to task on the allegations that his 17-year-old son, Sean Hartman, died from myocarditis caused by their COVID shot in September of 2021, and Pfizer just responded. So let's dig in. The defendants, Pfizer Canada and BioNTech Manufacturing, have filed separate but strikingly similar statements of defense, dated December 5th, 2025, denying all liability and seeking dismissal of the case.
Why is there much more redactions, as my colleague said, in these documents than in other documents? It's because these documents were signed at the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody was desperate for vaccines, when companies were being told to rush vaccine production, do testing in an unprecedented way, in a way they normally don't do it. So these companies were exposed to way higher liability, putting their products on the market than they normally would, because they didn't do the type of testing that normally takes these drugs years to come to market. They did it all in less than a year.
Pfizer's defense admits minor factual details like corporate structures, but denies the core allegations of negligence, misrepresentation, and failure to warn. They emphasize that the vaccine, branded Comirnaty, was developed amid the global COVID-19 crisis, which they say claimed over 7 million lives worldwide and 60,000 in Canada. This, they say, justified the urgent need for COVID-19 diagnoses, treatment, mitigation, and prevention options. Pfizer calls their clinical trials involving 44,000 people rigorous, a trial, I might add, that started in April of 2020, but has not yet had a successfully completed quality control review. In fact, all 4 previous submissions were rejected or required fixes. So while Health Canada expedited authorization for these shots while they were still in the middle of ongoing clinical trials in December of 2020, Pfizer now asks the court to accept the product's safety and adequacy of warnings, despite the fact that its own trial results remain administratively unresolved literally years later to this day. In their defense filing, Pfizer highlights 2 manufacturing processes called Process 1 and 2, insisting that both were tested for comparability and disclosed to regulators, countering Hartman's legal team's claims of untested changes. Now, before we go further into this, here is a clip of scientist and pharmaceutical regulatory specialist Maria Gucci, who warned of things like adulterations, impurities, misapplied regulatory oversight, and manufacturing process changes with me in October of 2023.
It's genetic engineering that makes the DNA, and from that DNA you make the mRNA. But that can't be scaled up very fast because it's slow, and it's a slower process and takes a fair amount of time. So plasmids put into E. coli is easier, faster, and because E. coli replicates in 20 minutes. So you can get a new plasmid in 20 minutes. So you can make a lot in a short period of time. And so that was a natural progression. What happened, though, is as they made the mRNA from a plasmid-based system rather than previously, what happened is that they had a lot of problems purifying it and making it comparable to the original that was done in the clinical trials. And from a regulatory perspective, then, do we know that this new product is going to work as well as the old one? So that was the big issue. So we have no comparison directly clinically, whether you're going to get the same clinical outcomes.
She had also joined me anonymously in November of 2021 to share that the ingredients of these shots, namely the lipid nanoparticles that encapsulate the mRNA that turn your body into a spike-generating factory, had never been used in humans before.
And then there were additional issues with regarding of the production of the lipid nanoparticles, that there were 2 of the fats used that are very highly, they're called zwitteronic. They're very, very ionic and toxic in large amounts. We're giving very small amounts though. But these 2 lipid products had never been used in humans before. And so normally, under normal conditions, we'd like to make sure that we would study those lipids separately before we put them into a vaccine. Part of the issue here about all of these is that we had no standard tolerance limits, is what I would call that, for these kind of products. This is the first one. So for another vaccine, or for, say, a drug product, you would say that each tablet would have to contain between 90 to 110% of the labeled amount. We didn't have that kind of standard for these products when they were being made, and so it was what was tolerated, or what was put forward by the manufacturer. So that there were a lot of issues regarding what is acceptable or what is not.
Genomics expert and highly regarded scientist Kevin McKernan, who first joined me in the summer of 2022 and several times since, has similarly and repeatedly sounded various alarms with these novel products.
Never before in history have we had a prodrug like this. This is effectively what it is. This is an mRNA. It's not the drug itself. It's going to go into your cells and create the drug. They are only theorizing what it's going to create. They have not demonstrated publicly what the mRNA is from a sequencing standpoint, where we see the raw reads and we can actually see the error rate in the vaccine production, because there is an error rate making these vaccines. These mRNAs are not faithfully reproduced when they synthesize this RNA. There's error rate there. When you have those modified nucleotides, when the ribosomes read them to make proteins, there's error rate there. It's known, it's measurable with this particular base. This has not been characterized. So we have a prodrug that's producing a drug, and the drug is not known. It's being given to billions of people with zero liability. This has never happened before in medicine.
Now back to Pfizer's defense, who say that warnings about rare myocarditis risks appeared in the product monograph by June of 2021. They allude to that being sufficient because it was 2 months before Sean's alleged vaccination, stating that cases were more common in young males, but they say resolved in most. Pfizer invokes the learned intermediary doctrine, arguing that warnings to healthcare professionals suffice, and they ultimately seem to deny causation, citing higher myocarditis risks from COVID-19 infection itself. They argue that no damages can be proven, and go further still by pointing Dan towards Canada's so-called Vaccine Injury Support Program called VISP, a program that he has already been trapped in for years. More disturbing is what my exclusive access to information investigations have revealed, that VISP struggles to assess and determine appropriate compensation amounts for children harmed by these products at all, precisely the kind of case now before the court. Pfizer ultimately claims that the suit is statute barred under Ontario's Limitations Act because it's been more than 2 years since Sean's death. BioNTech, the German biotech firm and vaccine market authorization holder in Canada, echoes these points in its defense. It denies involvement in direct distribution, which they say was handled by Pfizer, and rejects the notion of a common design tort among defendants, emphasizing their independent corporate statuses. BioNTech outlines mRNA technology's safety, the same clinical and manufacturing details, and Health Canada's rolling review process. It also points to the June 2021 monograph warning of myocarditis and denying any concealment or inadequacy. BioNTech denies any negligent design, manufacturing, or failure to provide warnings, affirms its compliance with all applicable regulations, and invokes the learned intermediary rule. Like Pfizer, it disputes causation, argues damages are speculative or unrelated, also notes VISP as a no-fault option, while pleading that the 2-year limitation period bars the claim. Both responses portray that the vaccine is a life-saving innovation, backed by over 1 billion doses administered globally and continuous Health Canada oversight, with benefits outweighing supposedly rare risks. This kind of flies in the face of Canada's own Chief Medical Officer of Health, Theresa Tam, who in March of 2021 confirms that the full scope of vaccine injury won't be known until the product is unleashed onto the entirety of the population.
Every medication or vaccine can come with rare side effects, which will not be picked up until many millions of people receive the vaccine. The initial clinical trial with tens of thousands will not pick up rare events. So I think the important thing, to emphasize to everyone is that we have systems and checks and balances in place. But please do Remember that over the course of the administration of the vaccine to many millions of people in the world, if there should be any new signals, we will be communicating that after a thorough examination. But science will continue to evolve in this space.
So while Pfizer and BioNTech seek full dismissal with costs, framing this suit as unsubstantiated amid a public health emergency, the case really brings to light the ongoing concern about vaccine injury liability. It seems to me that Pfizer's defense unintentionally reveals just how much work went into obscuring a critical manufacturing switch the public was never told about. While they insist that processes 1 and 2 were comparable, it also needs to be acknowledged that phase 1 and phase 2 trials did not test that second process switch at all. Protocol Amendment 20 confirms that once Pfizer shifted manufacturing, they deleted the original trial cohort tied to Process 1 and then relied instead on so-called real-world data after the product was already shipped. Yet all public communications continued to cite Phase 1 and 2 data as proof the vaccine was safe and effective. Remember, Pfizer had to move at the speed of science and left a lot of questions unanswered before they brought these products to market, as admitted by senior executive Janelle Small in the European Union Parliament in October of 2022.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it entered the market? No, we had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
In my opinion, Hartman's case isn't about relitigating the pandemic, but about accountability after it. Pfizer and BioNTech asked the court to excuse unresolved trials, evolving warnings, and denied injuries by pointing to urgency, scale, and regulatory approval. But Hartman asks a simpler question. When a product is rushed to market and risks are only acknowledged after mass use, who's responsible when the cost is a child's life? For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. To see more reports just like this one and support this journalism, please head over to nomoreshots.ca. That's nomoreshots.ca.